Hello and welcome. I'm Maria from Sew Through Time, and this time we're looking at the differences between summer and winter dressing in 1903. My base layer is combination underwear. That is a combination of a chemise and drawers in one. On the left for summer, the combinations are made out of linen, and on the right they are made for winter out of a washable silk. In both seasons, to get that year's ultra fashionable, ultra curvy look, I use a hip improver. In this era, there is no stigma for using padding. It was just considered an important part of getting the right silhouette, because fashion was just about the silhouette, not about the actual body underneath. So bust and hip padding were openly sold and openly advertised. They were equal to corsetry as a way of getting the right silhouette, and you'd use them whatever way is easiest for you to achieve that silhouette. So if you were naturally squishy and curvy, then most of the silhouette would be done by the corset and then only slightly padded. But if you were naturally more straight and less squishy, then most of the silhouette would be done by padding, and the corset would just be there to hold the padding in place and give the smooth lines. There, of course, was an idea of the ideal female body, but it didn't necessarily match what the fashionable silhouette was at the time. There was no idea that a woman should actually look like she did with her clothes on. That was her private body, was the thing on the inside. And that outer body, that maid body, was the thing that she presented to the world, and that was what was considered fashionable. In 03, the hips are exaggerated and the corset comes low on the hips, and the bust is low, with the corset providing shelf-like support but no lift. In this era, they did have separate summer corsets that were made out of different kinds of mesh fabrics, but since my corset is a single layer of silk taffeta, it is very lightweight and breathable, so I haven't needed a separate summer corset. There are two hooks at the side back of the corset to hold the lacing knot down from my waist, the most narrow part, to keep that silhouette smooth, and reduce bulk at the waist, just like the combination underwear, with having just one layer of fabric instead of two. Now, as for stockings, in the summer you'd use thin ones. I'm using silk, but also cotton and linen were options. For winter, thicker wool ones were the best option. And no, not all wool is itchy. Merino wool has been a thing for hundreds of years, and of course next to skin you'd choose non-itchy wools. And next comes the corset cover. For summer you'd choose either sleeveless or short-sleeved in cotton or linen. Its job was to protect your outer garments from sweat and help build the fashionable silhouette. For winter, they were typically long-sleeved and either cotton or wool, and it would protect your garments from sweat and also keep you warmer. It didn't necessarily have to build the silhouette so much, since the outer garments were of thicker, more structured materials. But it would still help smooth out any corset lines or lines from padding. And next comes your petticoats. In the summertime, especially if your skirt had a drop lining, you could get away with just one, especially if it was made out of taffeta like mine. Linen, cotton, and sateen were other popular options. For wintertime, you'd add at least one extra one for warmth. It could be knitted out of wool like mine, or silk, or cotton or wool flannel. This extra layer of warmth would especially protect any exposed skin between your drawers and your stockings, whereas the outer petticoat or two would help build the silhouette and help keep the skirt from clinging onto your legs and stockings as you walk. This is also what allows you to walk upstairs without holding your skirts up. Petticoats of this era are always flat in the front, and in the back they could be either ruched like mine, or it could be also flat for a habit back skirt. Though petticoats could enhance the S bend in the back, they didn't mean to add much fullness to the hip itself. The bottom typically had added fullness in the form of tucks and ruffles to help the outer skirts fall in graceful lines. The petticoats would also obscure any lines or bumps from the padding. And though petticoats are very much still considered underwear, they could be sometimes slightly visible through very thin material skirts. And next comes the bodice. In both cases, I opted for a shirtwaist or waist, which is what we would nowadays call a blouse. It was by far the most common bodice option of this era. It was worn by all social classes, and it came in a huge variety of different materials and patterns. And basically, almost all dresses had a shirtwaist top part to them. In this era, dresses were in fact a separate bodice and skirt, just made out of matching materials. These waists could have either visible or invisible closures. They could be in the front or back, or elaborate side front things, and all kinds of different variations. They could be left unlined or partly lined, or they could have a separate fitted lining, in which case the corset cover could sometimes be omitted if the waist was made out of a washable material so that you didn't need the corset cover for sweat protection. In 03, regardless of the weather, day bodices are long-sleeved and high-necked, though this would change in a few years. But this meant that the fabric protected your skin from the sun, meaning that it actually kept you cooler than if your skin was directly exposed to the sun. For summer, I'm opting for a cotton lace waist. This would allow for a lot of air circulation, keeping me cool, but still protects me from the sun. Other options would be lightweight linens, cottons, and silks. This waist could actually be worn well into the spring and fall by adding a corset cover or separate lining piece made out of a silk. For winter, I opted for a wool flannel with cotton velvet details. Other possible options could be cottons, especially flannels, and silks, of course. 03 is the last year when white shirtwaists are not considered appropriate for winter wear. The shirtwaist waist area could be left loose like on mine, to be later tucked into the skirt, or it could have a ribbon tie at the waist to hold it in the proper shape already, or it could have a self-material tight waist piece that the bodice would gather into. Buttons, hooks and eyes, and snaps were all popular closures, and could also be used in combination with each other, like on my winter waist, where it closes up the front with buttons, the velvet piece closes with snaps, and the collar closes with hooks and eyes. And next comes the skirt. Skirts of this era are mostly made out of fairly thin drapey materials, and they often had a separate drop lining like these to eliminate one extra petticoat. This helps keep the waist trim by eliminating another extra waistband. And at this time, most skirts had trains, even day skirts like these. And even if they didn't have trains, they often still touched the ground as you walked, unless they were intended for rainy day or wet weather wear, in which case they were typically 4 to 6 inches off the ground. And because the materials were lightweight, wool, cotton, and silk were all used year-round. Only really linen and sheer organdies and organzas were limited to summer use only. Skirts could close at the back like mine, or at the side or side front, depending on the pattern pieces of the skirt, and they typically would have a pocket along with the closure. And my winter waist has a hook that hooks onto the petticoat, keeping it nice and trim in the back so that it doesn't rise as I move my arms. And then I add a belt to emphasize that narrow waist. And here you can see how the layers have built that fashionable S shape. The corset and padding make it seem as if my hips were tilted back. The shape of the corset, along with the blousey drape of the fabrics, create that low mono bosom or pigeon bust effect. For jewelry, I'm wearing earrings and a brooch. For winter, my brooch is cut steel, and for summer, it's vulcanite. And next comes shoes. For winter, I'm choosing a pair of Good Sense boots. These are low-heeled and made out of thick leather, and are more practical than fashionable, like the name implies. For summer, though boots have been the standard for a long time, I also have the option of choosing Oxfords, which were a popular and practical option, keeping you cooler, especially when you were active. And again, this was more a practical option rather than a strictly fashionable one. And while leather was probably the most popular option for these also could be made out of canvas. And since I'm heading out for winter, I'm adding another layer in the form of a wool spencer. These were thin wool jackets that were intended to add more warmth underneath a wool coat. And etiquette manuals of the time warned that they should not be worn separate as a garment indoors, but should be always taken off with the coat or worn in the countryside, which of course means that women did that all the time, because otherwise it wouldn't need to be stated. Because if there's one thing that you can count on, is that if there's an etiquette rule, somebody will break it. And next comes the hat. For winter, I'm wearing a velvet toque or turban style that is secured with hat pins. Though hats of this era can sometimes be quite large, they had usually a fairly small crown and were intended to sit on top of the hair rather than cover the whole head. For summer, I'm using a pink horsehair one to match my belt. Since the hats sit on top of the hair and are held in place with sharp, long hat pins, they were also used for self-defense sometimes, which of course meant that they were ridiculed by men and even they tried to ban them at one point. For winter, I'm wearing a wool scarf, but also silk scarves, along with feather marabou scarves, and fur scarves were popular options. And next comes my winter coat. I'm wearing a wool one since it's only a few degrees below freezing, but for colder weather, fur and faux fur in the form of wool plushes were very popular options. On a side note, we really should get back to making faux fur out of wool plush. Not only would it not shed any microplastic fibers, but also it would be warmer and naturally fire retardant. Anyways, coats of this era typically are A-lined and don't actually show off that corseted waist. I didn't actually make this coat. It is an antique original and it is in pristine condition and very much wearable today. And next comes gloves. And though they weren't strictly necessary for summertime, they are useful even in summer. I'm wearing crocheted lace ones for summer and thin leather ones for winter. Knitted wool ones would be another option, as well as knitted wool mittens if I was planning on not wearing them off. Though the purpose of gloves for winter might be obvious, they did have a purpose for summer as well. They are good at wicking away moisture from sweat, keeping your hands cooler and drier. Gloves of this era are extremely form-fitting, meaning they are a bit slower to put on, but once on, they fit like a second skin and you don't lose any finger dexterity. And if you were to shake someone's hand, you always do that with gloves on, but for eating and drinking, you always take gloves off. And with the addition of the muff, I'm ready to enjoy a winter day. And to complete the summer look, I add a parasol. If it's cloudy, it can be used for a fashionable walking stick accessory, and on a sunny day, it would work as your own personal portable shade, keeping you much cooler as you go about your day. In modern times with climate-controlled everything, it's easy to forget how important it is to protect your body from the elements. Because be it hot or cold, your clothing works as an insulation against you and the elements, keeping your body temperature more regulated. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this, and did any of this information maybe come as a surprise to you? Let me know in the comments. Remember to do all the usual things of liking, subscribing, and sharing, because those do really help out in this world. See you again next time. Bye!